About a month ago, I was scrolling Reddit, as one does, and I came across a post in a gossip subreddit that I'm a part of. Yes, I do like hearing people complain about celebrities. What can I say? Complaining is one of my favorite pastimes. Long story short, Shailene Woodley, an actor who's well known for her roles in movie adaptations of The Fault in Our Stars and Divergent, two books that absolutely wrecked the population of girls in my 6th grade homeroom class, had reposted Melania Trump's statement about the attempted assassination of the former president. Now, Shailene reposting this could be seen as something unsavory in itself by some people, but it was the baggage that came along with her reposting this that truly rocked my world. The crunchy to far-right pipeline is truly tragic, said the top comment under this post. I was confused. I was under the impression that crunchy and granola lifestyles, new colloquial terms that are describing what is ultimately a hippie, were generally filled with more leftist viewpoints than anything else. I mean, I somewhat identify with all those terms, and I'm definitely not a part of the far right. Then I fell into this pipeline. No, not the one I'm talking about in this video. Literally, I just fell into the open, deep, gaping crevice that this comment left in my mind. Through my internet researching, I ended up discovering that Shailene Woodley actually admitted to eating clay in order to remove negative toxins from her body. After eating clay for the first time, Woodley admitted that she smelled like metal for a while. Well, it looks like all that metal went into your head instead of helping to cleanse the toxins from your body. This is what I believe in. This is what I want to say. And I think that's a rite of passage. But I wouldn't change anything. I think it's important for us to be ourselves. And I'm weird. Yeah. That's a bit weird. Her reposting Melania Trump's statement calling for a great unification between the American electorate despite the constant violent rhetoric pushed by Donald Trump sparked people to allege that Shailene Woodley had indeed gone from crunchy to an alleged alt-right pundit. This pipeline is very literal for her, going from being arrested along with 26 others demonstrating against the construction of a pipeline to transport fracked crude oil near the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation to reposting this was all but not shocking to people who are well versed in the crunchy to the alt-right pipeline. Now, it is one thing to condemn political violence. It's another thing to repost Donald Trump's somehow still wife's statement on an attempt made on his life. To many, this was considered Shailene Woodley showing her red, white, and blue colors arranged in the shape of an elephant. I want to make it clear that I'm not alleging that Shailene Woodley is a part of the alt-right because I don't think we can fully make that conclusion off of one Instagram story. I'm just introducing this topic through a real-life experience that I had on Reddit. You know, Reddit often induces existential life crises in me while I'm scrolling, but this time, you know, I'm turning it into something productive. Instead of, you know, crying. From this jumping off point, today we will be extensively covering the long, exhaustive, crunchy / granola to alt-right pipeline. Now, I realize that pretty much anything can radicalize someone nowadays, specifically into the alt or the far right. Gym culture, beauty standards, loneliness, misogyny, gaming, self-help, transphobia, and so much more can all lead to someone becoming an alt-right loony. If you're part of a certain community or have a specific attribute, the extremely sophisticated algorithms that watch your every move online can easily push you down a radical pipeline of no return where you're drowned in the NYC sewers along with your radical brethren. That's not to say that everyone who is granola or a gamer, for example, is automatically an anti-vax, misogynistic conspiracy theorist or is immediately at risk of falling down this pipeline. But it's still a possible risk, and one that's actually been very well documented. I think that, me personally, I'm pretty safe though. You know, I've lived my entire life growing up in a small-minded conservative town, and I've grown, just developed beliefs of my own. That's why I don't get my tetanus shot anymore since graduating high school.
What a perfect world. It seems harmless enough, like so many photos and videos on Instagram. But there's more to these images than meets the eye.
The healthcare industry and the pharmaceutical industry, both of which I feel are ripe for criticism, but if you can create a binary where everything that they produce is bad, well, then that's one of the main pipelines you have for at least the wellness influencers, but also on the right. Alex Jones made millions of dollars selling supplements.
Once I stopped allowing the news to make up my mind or my narrative for me, I grew exponentially, not just politically, but spiritually, intellectually.
But there's the dangers of domestic terrorism, extremism, and ethnic counter use of social media.
Are there extreme
Crunchy is usually used as a reference for the food granola, which is typically associated with hippies and free thinkers. Both can, in general, be used interchangeably to describe a culture of values and practices that some people choose to implement in their lives. Common practices of crunchy living generally include buying exclusively whole or organic foods, gardening, connecting to the earth, making their own food, or being anti-industrialist or anti-capitalist. At least, that's what logic would have you believe that these people think. The extreme end of this community can in fact include a lot of anti-vax beliefs, anti-pharmaceutical sentiments such as wearing sunscreen is bad for you, homeschooling, classism, racism, and rigid traditional gender roles. How did we get here though? As I stated in the intro, I wouldn't choose to identify with this term, but I guess it can describe me somewhat. I garden, I hunt, I do a lot of recreational outside activities. I love eating healthy and making my own food from scratch. I like going outside and connecting with the earth. Just this morning, I stood outside for 5 minutes in the sun because it made me feel good, okay? I literally own crystals that I use for meditation, and I generally hold the belief that we would be in a better place if we started bartering with each other again. Inflation? What the fuck is that? It's made up, that's what it is. That's where my crunchy beliefs end, however. While I have a probably more than healthy distrust for pharmaceutical companies, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that not vaccinating your child for polio is a good thing. I don't believe that society is collapsing on itself due to radical leftism, or as Trump would have it, radical leftism, right? I generally don't like taking medication if I don't have to, but if I'm dying of kidney failure, I'm gonna get those dialysis treatments, baby. The last thing I tell you is to rub some lavender on your back to help with your jaundice, okay? While I can toe this line of distrust and common sense, the crunchy people who have fallen into this rabbit hole can't, because how in any world would you think that supporting a Republican politician would lead us to having better environmental policies? But it was never really about that for them, was it? No, their crunchy lifestyle was always in a separate realm than the rest of ours. In the book Doppelganger, A Trip into the Mirror World, Naomi Klein examines her doppelganger, Naomi Wolf. While Klein is a self-identified leftist, Wolf, who once held liberal feminist beliefs, begins falling down into the pipeline in the late 2010s that only intensified after the fall of COVID on the world. What do we do when important ideas and concepts are being distorted in this way, when absurdity seems to take over, making serious discussion impossible? What do we do when we seem surrounded by warped doubles and imposters? When faced with a double threatening to engulf you and your world, or an army of them, distance offers no protection. Far better to radically upend the table and become, in some sense, their impersonator, their shadow. Hippies, despite what myths by the media want you to believe, were not country people living in small town, impoverished areas like me. Hippies were largely a white, middle-class group of teenagers and 20-somethings who belonged to what demographers call the baby boom generation. They felt alienated from middle-class society, which they saw as dominated by materialism and repression. Hippies developed their own distinctive lifestyle whereby they constructed a sense of marginality. While my beliefs partially stem from a sense of scarcity and underprivileged lifestyle, in the fact that I would be what some consider a hillbilly due to where I live and the activities that I partake in, hippies were part of a movement because they wanted to be, not because it was a necessity for their survival. It's important to consider the context of the hippies, a majority white, middle-class group of young people with the undeniable luxury of being able to drop out. Even considering their participation in the civil rights and anti-war movements, the fact is that hippies had less at stake than those fighting for civil rights so that they can fully participate in society, not drop out. While some people in the world may still hunt and gather as a necessity to feed their families, those who live the crunchy lifestyle are able to do it largely due to the privileges that they have. Privileges such as being able to afford higher quality foods at the store that have less additives in them, or having the large and copious amounts of times that it takes to tend to a garden that actually feeds your entire family. A comment on a very popular Crunchy Mom's TikTok actually reads, "Crunchy Mom equals I have so much money that I can pay for anything I want." Which, hey, isn't entirely untrue. Hippies back then, and also modern day crunchy people, are often accused of cultural appropriation. I actually just finished reading Braiding Sweetgrass because I've always felt a connection, you could say, to indigenous beliefs and cultures, and that book really helped me change my perspective towards the earth in a very positive way. However, what hippies were often accused of was not just a simple love for other cultures. You can do that, white people, okay? Don't get mad at me. Don't shoot the messenger, right? Hippies would practice their yoga and free-loving culture without even acknowledging where these practices originally came from, which was ignorant, especially when you consider that many hippies had very privileged backgrounds. This appropriation is prevalent today in the crunchy and granola spheres as well. Quite often, privileged white people will repackage beliefs and aesthetics, if you will, of other cultures and get praise for it, while Native Americans, as an example, were literally genocided for their way of life, which was deemed savage. The way of life that a lot of white people take advantage of and get praised for. For example, non-indigenous people selling sweetgrass on Etsy to make a quick buck off of people like me without any consideration of what sweetgrass actually means to native tribes. Chelsea Luger writes for Refinery29 saying, indigenous ceremonial traditions weren't formally legalized until 1978 when the American Indian Religious Freedoms Act was passed. A large chunk of the Native American population remained shut out of our spiritual practices. Many people in our communities didn't grow up learning about our spirituality at all, and those of us who did have often been met with barriers. For example, when I tried to burn sweetgrass in my dorm as a college freshman, my roommate made a complaint to administration and I was asked to stop because it made her uncomfortable. This article continues on to discuss how to recognize appropriation within the wellness community and how to support indigenous practices without being disrespectful, so I highly recommend that you check it out. Yoga is another common practice within these wellness and crunchy hippie spaces that has been co-opted in a very often distasteful way. Rina Deshpande writes, when I was young, my yoga practice was a source of ridicule. Once, my parents had a guru host a yoga lecture in our house, which brought Indian women and saris and their husbands and children down our walkway into our home. Chants of Om echoed through open windows. The boys on my block mocked me relentlessly for the end of the week. She goes on to say that she's happy for how many people have connected with a practice that's from her culture, but that she feels resentment over how she was treated for her practice and how yoga has been divorced from its true meaning by a lot of people. Many traditional practices from dozens of cultures around the world have unfortunately faced this treatment, leading to a $1 trillion wellness industry filled with crystals, singing bowls, and spiritual and religious rituals being exploited by people void of their roots. At the core of this, as I've discussed and will continue to do throughout this video, these crunchy lifestyles have a strong air of classism and privileges stinking up the atmosphere around them, other than the smell of their armpits that have been rubbed down with mint leaves in vain. Jacob Chansley, aka the QAnon Shaman, one of the most visible faces of the attack on the US Capitol on January 6, 2021, thanks to his face paint and horn headgear, is a practitioner of quote-unquote shamanic arts, who eats natural and organic food and has more than once been described as an eco-fascist. Cultural appropriation, baby. Despite all of this very real criticism that hippies and modern-day crunchy folk have faced, hippies were generally more left-leaning than the current idea of what a crunchy person is nowadays. Crunchy, which often carries a very negative undertone. Hippies were protesting wars and dangerous Republican policies. How did this movement get to where it is now, with the doesn't believe in climate change and modern medicine crowd taking a front seat in this culture online? Growing up in such a hippie area and with most of them being left-wing all of my life until recently has been so weird for me. The alternative lifestyle to right-wing fascism pipeline is always strange to me, but it has become so common. I have to bring up the book Doppelganger again. One, because it has a lot of useful insight relative to this video, but also because I read the entire 600-page book in large print because that's all they had available at the library, and I want it to seem like my time was at least a little worthwhile. Almost everyone I talk to these days seems to be losing people to the mirror world. People who are familiar but have somehow become alien, leaving us with that unsettled, uncanny feeling. One would have you believe that being environmentally friendly and invested in wellness in yourself, but also for the planet, would equal to someone holding more progressive beliefs. But this is not always true, as we will discuss further. It's worth noting that when we see people on the far right adopt these pro-environmental policies, it's often not because they actually believe in them. I mean, conservatives are the ones who most often deny climate change. It's because they are using their wellness and care for the earth as a guise for their true motives. The truth is, eco-fascism has a long history, both in the US and in Europe. Blair Taylor is a researcher at the Institute for Social Ecology. He said that even the Nazis saw themselves as environmentalists. The idea that natural purity translate into racial or national purity, that was one that was very central to the Nazis' environmental discourse of blood and soil, Taylor said. There are a lot of blurred lines when it comes to identifying yourself as granola or crunchy, as I just went over within myself. A lot of people usually differentiate between the two, with granola meaning more of like your traditional hippie and crunchy meaning that you tan your holes. Don't worry. We will be getting into that. Many crunchy people have widely varying beliefs though. Some hunt, others are vegan. Some do home births and homeschooling. Others don't believe in vaccinating their kids. Some hike and do outdoorsy things for fun. Others are straight up white supremacist. What I'm trying to say is that these labels are not a monolith, but at the same time, all of us naturalists, hippies, maybe truly country folk, whatever we identify with, can be at risk of falling into, or maybe even further into this pipeline if the process hasn't already taken hold. While some people celebrate farming, health, and organic food, others go back to the spirituality, morality, and social values not merely of a pre-internet era, but of a pre-feminist or pre-civil rights era, as we see with tradwives as well. Granola Nazis align with groups known as crunchy moms and anti-Semitic raw egg nationalists. blend organic living with far-right policies, linking nature and whiteness with anti-feminist leanings. A poster on the r/moderately granola moms subreddit was also seeking answers to the question of what is really crunchy. What does granola primarily mean to you? For me, it's about being aware of microplastics, what's in the food we eat, like reading the label to see how many grams of added sugar something has before choosing whether to buy it. Caring about whether clothes and other fabrics are sprayed with fire retardants. I also relate it to wanting to raise kids in a way that's more connected to nature, slower pace of life, etc. But for me, none of those things are anti-scientific, and lots are actually grounded in science. So I'm always surprised by anti-vax stuff and other things here. Over time, the left-leaning crunchy moms became more anti-science and started rejecting things like vaccines. Meanwhile, right-leaning moms also started getting into conspiracy theories and to become skeptical of authorities, scientists, government agencies, public school, and the two groups merged into modern crunchy mom groups. In the book Educated by Tara Westover, we can see how an extreme living off the land and homeschooling mindset, common traits associated with crunchy people, can be closely tied to white Christian nationalism. For instance, the author and her siblings never see doctors throughout the book, not even for some extremely graphic injuries that were described. In fact, Westover's family was so isolated that after her mother's home birth, she didn't receive a birth certificate and wouldn't until she was 9. Westover faced extreme abuse from some of her family members and was unable to do anything about it. She recounted how one of her brothers would often call her the N-word after she came out of her father's junkyard with her face covered in black grease. Her family is by far one of the most extreme examples of how traditional living can lead you all the way into white supremacy, extreme gender traditionalism, and great replacement theories, with Tara's family specifically using their Mormon faith as a backbone for their conspiracy theories. After the pandemic, their granola style, which emphasizes organic food, homestead-style living, and winsome white children, has become even more influential in the right-wing community. Far-right trad wife influencers like Robin Biley or Blonde the Belly of the Beast, as well as women from the British white national group Patriotic Alternative, use this style to spread anti-vaccine, pro-white messaging. In describing her doppelganger's radical shift, Klein says, "What many of us missed was the extent to which her new messaging has struck a chord, not only with Fox's audience, but also with a sizable cohort of progressives who were terrified of the Black Mirror surveillance world she was describing." Two articles that I've cited already, Granola Nazis, Traditional Traditionalism, and the Folkish Movement and the Normalization of the Far Right, and the Crunchy to Alt-Right Pipeline, both go into detail about how this linking of naturalism and living off the land lifestyle has always been closely linked to extremist viewpoints. The first article discusses the Volkish movement, which promoted a return to the land and nature's purity. Volkish is often translated as ethno-nationalism, and often combines a care for a slower and less modern lifestyle, aka returning to the land, and white nationalism. The second article mentioned discusses the more recent white power movements of the 70s and 80s, which we will cover as well. With the Volkish movement for its basis, the Nazis promoted the view that the class struggle in the city could be overcome by returning to the villages and developing artisan and agricultural economies based on cooperation. Aryans needed to get back to the soil and simple life. Alfred Rosenberg wrote in his The Myth of the 20th Century, "Today we see the steady stream from the countryside to the city, deadly for the Volk. The cities swell ever larger, unnerving the Volk and destroying the threads which bind humanity to nature. They attract adventurers and profiteers of all colors, thereby fostering racial chaos." Ludwig Woltmann, a German anthropologist and zoologist, took a negative attitude towards modern industrialism. He claimed that the change from an agrarian to an industrial society had hastened the decline of the race. In contrast to nature, which endangered the harmonic forms of Germanism, there were the big cities, diabolical and inorganic, destroying the virtues of the race. Wilhelm Heinrich Riehl's 1853 essay, Field and Forest, ended with a call to fight for the rights of wilderness. But even here, national pathos set the tone. We must save the forests, not only so that our ovens do not become cold in winter, but also so that the pulse of life of the people continues to beat warm and joyfully, so that Germany remains German. These are only a few out of a lot that display how modern crunchiness can be intentionally linked with Nazism. Of course, the Nazis were not actually environmentalists, and the environmental policies that they did push out were not popular at all. They were only using this as a shroud for their true intentions, which included, but is not limited to, the push for a pure race. Obviously, I'm not arguing that the influencers I'm going to discuss in this video are Adolf fucking Hitler. I'm just trying to make the connection so that we can better understand how having a garden could possibly lead to someone making posts about white genocide. The Nazis would also establish the first nature preserves in Europe and an unprecedented level of government support for ecologically sound farming methods. Though such activities might appear remarkably forward-thinking, when taken out of context, this ecological program was undertaken with a goal of dominating, displacing, and destroying millions of human beings. Even recently, we have seen this link between the alt-right and environmentalism. The El Paso shooter said in his manifesto, If we can get rid of enough people, then our way of life can become more sustainable. An Australian man accused of murdering 51 people at a mosque called himself an ethno-nationalist, eco-fascist, and wrote that continued immigration into Europe is an environmental warfare. All it takes is sufficient military force wielded by a power willing to denounce your culture as savage and declare you brutes, casting people as unattached to land, because they practice different forms of agriculture, because they move with the seasons. Whatever story served the end goal has always been a precursor to genocide. Jews were declared rootless before they were slaughtered, much as colonial powers had declared indigenous peoples nomadic and therefore uncivilized as a prelude for stealing their land. In the 70s and 90s, white power movements often deployed the need for organic living and homesteading to attract the free-loving leftist. During the farm crisis of the 70s, many people living in rural communities would become victims of radicalization from white power groups. I'll link an entire article down below on how homesteading and white supremacy have been historically linked. It's all very fascinating, but a lot to cover. These Nazi ties also had and have an increasingly narrow focus on eugenics when in relation to the crunchy lifestyle. Whether this is intentional or not, many of these crunchy influencers promote eating clean, taking care of yourself, and being pure, and especially an all or nothing mentality when it comes to their crunchy lifestyles. Whatever I once thought the line was between them and us, it was no longer holding. Clearly a poison had been released in the culture, and it was not only coursing among right-wingers with the help of a few liberal crossover stars. This was something else, a poisonous compound of natural living, bodily strength, fitness, purity, and divinity, alongside their opposites, unnaturalist, body weakness, slothfulness, contamination, and damnation. Of course, all of this is strongly rooted in classism because only some of us have access to the privilege needed to take care of our bodies properly and to tend to a natural living lifestyle. I would not be surprised if there was also a group of crunchy livers online who, that sounded crunchy livers, they do like to eat liver. You know, people who are crunchy online who also push intense transphobia, which would tie into their disdain for modernity, although trans people have always existed, and also for using modern medicine, which hormones and hormone blockers would certainly fall into. As the lovely Jessie Gender explored in this video, transphobia itself can lead into the alt-right due to similar issues that I presented within the crunchy community. As we can see, it's all related. The COVID pandemic only exacerbated people's distrust within the system and sped up many people's transition into the radical right. I've been saying this a while now, that I feel that there was a definite shift in the crunchy community sometime between having my first kid, late 2010, to my last, late 2019, where the moms went from earthly new age types to alt-right hardcore religious trad wives. As someone who had natural midwife births, birth center, extended breastfed, baby wear, co-slept, cloth diapered, and now homeschools, nearly every mom I met that followed a similar path is far more conservative and very anti-science, especially in regards to homeschooling, where 90% of the homeschooling community here is very alt-right and religious. I used to follow a somewhat crunchy popular health spiritual doctor who had good recipes and product recommendations for a while, but sometime during the pandemic started talking about end times and how light warriors are going to war against good versus evil and preparing for what's to come. I'll link a video down below by Leisha Miller about how the right rebranded eugenics. While she doesn't fully cover the crunchy aspect of it, the content still ties into some of what we've gone over in this video. During the rise of COVID, people took notice of a lot of people they knew falling down into this pipeline, becoming staunchly anti-vax, victimizing themselves to the level of Jews in the Holocaust, treating those who are at greater risk of getting sick as less than, and saying that we should just let nature run its course and return the earth to its natural state. Far from the unlikely bedfellows as they first seem to be, large part of the modern wellness industry are proving to be all too compatible with far-right notions of natural hierarchies, genetic superiority, and disposable people. While I do agree that we humans are by far doing the worst that we could possibly be doing, especially those of us in wealthier nations, we also have a duty as humans and as creatures of the earth to protect the planet that we live on. To say that we shouldn't be here at all is a steep slope into pushing eugenic ideology, as we saw during the throes of Corona. Braiding Sweetgrass, which I mentioned earlier, is a book about indigenous knowledge and teachings. It discusses the roles that humans have in protecting wildlife, particularly plants, and how the commodification of everything due to capitalism has led us astray as creatures of the earth. Unsurprisingly enough, most of these crunchy influencers never critique the actual systems of oppression that we are forced to live in, namely capitalism, baby. In fact, you'll see many of them pushing green codes down your throat at every opportunity and buying new things just to fit into the aesthetic of being connected to the earth. Now, that's not to say that there aren't crunchy influencers who are genuine and really do live the lifestyle that they're promoting down to a T. However, who is defining what crunchy truly is? We tried to define it earlier, but I think I conveyed well enough that it doesn't really have an obvious or exact definition. A lot of the definitions of what it means to take part in granola, wellness, crunchy, whatever the fuck lifestyles are very all or nothing, which can push some very harmful beliefs onto people, other than the racism, of course. Now that we have more than just an idea, yes, I talk a lot, okay, shut up, of how the far right of the past has included some crunchy elements into their extremism, how are modern day crunchy influencers intentionally or unintentionally feeding into this radicalization? I want to preface this by saying that this is not meant to be an attack on these creators. In fact, I understand where all of them are coming from, but that doesn't mean that they're not exempt from criticism, and I highly implore you, do not attack them. Okay, that's weird. One creator that we'll discuss at the end of the video was in fact actually already called out for possibly creating a space where people could be radicalized, allegedly. I also did not pick these specific people to allege that they are far-right lunatics, but some of their content is bordering on it, okay. Again, as I said before, I am the last person to trust the government, but there is distrust, and then there is vaccines cause autism and they're lying about it. Hey, it worked on me. You'll notice that most of the creators in the wellness sphere are women. Yes, thin, cishet white women, I know, but let's focus on the woman aspect of this. One creator, Ashley, lives in a bus with her unvaccinated children and regularly suns her yoni. All of those statements are not equal, I know. Let's get the sunning of the buttholes and vaginas out of the way, because for some fucking reason, a lot of wellness influencers started peddling this lie to all of you a couple years ago. Tucker Carlson, I blame you. Let me just say off the top that this is not good for you. I am absolutely the kind of person who will go outside to sunbathe while sitting in the grass, getting covered with bugs so I can connect to the earth. I fucking love doing that. The sun can boost your mood, and vitamin D is an essential nutrient. Has anyone you know ever said that they actually like living in Seattle? Okay? No, they're lying if they have, okay? Or they have a gun to their head. Yes, the sun has positive benefits. However, these areas of your skin are very thin and sensitive, and despite what crunchy gurus want you to believe, you can get skin cancer if you're overexposed to the sun throughout your life without any sunscreen on. More on sunscreen later. Sitting spread eagle in front of the sun, while it may make you feel mentally better, it just puts you at a higher risk of getting skin cancer. Now, Ashley lives on a bus that does move, okay, with her children and practices unschooling her kids, which is similar to homeschooling, but different. Chad recently did a very funny video on this, so check that out if you'd like more knowledge on that. Both of these forms of schooling are very, very prevalent in the crunchy community. While homeschooling follows how and what students are traditionally taught in schools, unschooling is an educational philosophy that focuses on children directing their own learning rather than following a set curriculum. Homeschooling, if done right, can be just as good as regular schooling. However, if done improperly, it can lead to kids being socially isolated and uneducated, and on the extreme end, something that we've talked about a lot in this video, being brought up with dangerous ideologies such as white supremacy. I can't make a judgment on this woman and her children. I just thought that we would cover homeschooling a bit since it is very popular within the communities we've discussed. Now, here is where gender becomes very important when it comes to criticizing these women. Not without reason, many women or gender minority people have a deep distrust for the medical industry. Women and gender minorities people's pain is often dismissed within medical spaces. Black and Indigenous women in particular have higher pregnancy-related mortality rates. Black and American Indian and Alaska Native women are over 3 and 2 times higher, respectively, compared to the rate for white women, 41.4 and 26.2 versus 13.7 per 100,000. Black, AI, AN, and Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander women also have higher shares of preterm births, low birth weight births, or births for which they receive late or no prenatal care compared to white women. With all of this being considered, it makes a lot of sense actually that a lot of women in particular end up falling down this pipeline. Women are also often more targeted when it comes to scams and this kind of far-right propaganda within the wellness community specifically. Dr. Michelle Cohen, while recognizing the real failures of her profession, she argues that these influencers are exploiting medicine's sexism to create a new engendered market for snake oil. Instead of trying to fix the system, they profit from its abandonments. The wellness industry wants to create a secondary pathway for women's issues outside of the mainstream, disproportionately exposing women to the harms of quackery. Ashley has been open on her page about her struggles with chronic pain, mental trauma, and the dismissals that she faced from doctors who only wanted to put her on drugs and not find out what was actually wrong with her. After seeing a holistic doctor, she was able to relieve her symptoms. I'm glad that worked for her, but to me, all this shows is modern medicine's serious failings when it comes to treating their patients, especially their women and gender minority patients. Instead of not vaccinating your child for polio or never eating a Dorito again in your life, we should instead have discussions and work with people to fix these systems that are broken. I don't know why I said it like that, but I'm not saying it again. Unfortunately, I don't really see this happening while capitalism is still the driving factor for pretty much everything in the world, including clean fucking water. Braiding Sweetgrass also touches on how industrialization, capitalism, and modern science has wronged us and the planets in many ways, but it does this in a well-balanced and nuanced way, not in a the earth is flat and NASA is lying to you way, right? I'd highly recommend you read that book if you're interested in anything that I've discussed throughout this video. Hopefully Nazism is excluded from that list of interests, right? Let's keep it to the gardening. There's a dude I mentioned a few months back in my TikTok cringe video. He had posted a video of him in a river with no sunglasses or sunscreen on, with the sun beating down on his well-toned back. In my video, I clowned on him for saying the pharmaceutical industry is lying to you about sun exposure and sunscreen, while there are plenty of other things about the pharmaceutical industry that you could fearmonger about. I love these people, they're always saying the wrong thing. They're like, they don't want you to know this, and it's like the one thing that they're right about. The government's right about. The government just want you to know that seatbelts are actually bad for you. It's like the one thing we actually know they're not lying to us about. The Sacklers, anyone, right? But no, that's not fear-mongering, because it's not a lie. Sunscreen giving you cancer is actually a very common belief held by holistic health influencers. While a handful of sunscreen products were pulled from shelves a few years ago due to carcinogens found in them, this could be linked to the fact that almost all of the recalled products were aerosol sunscreens, which are at a higher risk of benzene, a known human carcinogen.
Okay, but first, when it comes to sunscreen and an increased risk for skin cancer, that's false. This creator was saying in the comments that there were increased rates of skin cancers over the last few decades because of increased sunscreen use. Skin cancer rates are higher because detection rates are higher, people are seeing more dermatologists, and people are living longer. Also, the depletion of the ozone layer is contributing to higher rates of skin cancer. I also want to say that the reasons behind skin cancer development is very complex, but we do 100% know that UV rays can damage DNA, which then messes up skin cells, which then can lead to skin cancer.
Without a doubt, mineral sunscreens are the obviously better choice, mostly due to the fact that they aren't killing the coral reefs. And if you actually cared about stuff like that, you'd probably choose that instead of having to lie about why to choose mineral sunscreens, right? Also, being in the sun all the time without ever wearing sunscreen is always going to be the worst option than wearing sunscreen. So Captain Morgan posts many crunching leaning videos with some masculinity tied in there. He's also a victim of completely missing the point. While preaching his many varying beliefs of nature being healing and the government lying to you, he also sells courses and holistic products because capitalism is what ties us closest to the land. A lot of these creators are just complete hypocrites in many different forms. They'll often preach about not consuming toxins, but then they'll eat raw milk and raw fucking liver. They'll use raw cow shit for exfoliant, but then go walk in the Hudson River, which is filled with 10 used needles per cubic centimeter. That last one was just an example, but you get what I mean. One crunchy mom influencer on TikTok is attempting to push back on all this hypocritical and all or nothing thinking within the community. Karina Dell is a holistic, natural living mom who sends her kids to forest schools, buys dye-free snacks, and has had a few of her births at home with a midwife. However, she has routinely pushed back on some people's extreme crunchy mindsets. In one video, she received a comment saying, "For crunchy mom, you sure do send your kids to the doctor a lot." To which she replied,
So, as a crunchy mom, I'm not allowed to take my kids to the doctor to make sure their lungs are clear and that they don't have an ear infection? Okay, take my crunchy card away.
In another video, someone calls her out for having tattoos on her body while promoting a natural and whole whatever the fuck lifestyle online. The comments are filled with people appreciating her sentiment that the lifestyle doesn't have to be all or nothing, because no one will 100% fit into a box, regardless of what label they've chosen to define themselves with. This is a common thing that I noticed within a lot of natural living communities online. Remember when zero waste was the hottest thing in the environmentalist sphere of the internet, and we were told that our waste for an entire year should be fit into a fucking mason jar, or else we're not good enough activists? I remember that. Thankfully, many people have pushed back against this mindset because it sets an unrealistic, and that's an understatement, standard of what it means to be an environmentalist. Corinne has also made several satirical videos poking fun at people who post their perfectly manicured, crunchy lives online, but who are probably doing the things that they say they aren't doing behind the scenes because, let's admit it, it's hard as hell to live this lifestyle perfectly. I mean, what even is perfect? Especially in a country like America. When she talks about having a hospital versus a home birth, she examines the pros and cons while acknowledging that both come with their own set of risk. Again, this ties into marginalized people within the medical system. A lot of people within the comments on videos like these share how they had horrible experiences and would have rather had a home birth where they could have felt more safe and comforted. On the other end, there are plenty of people who disagree with the cons she brings up when it comes to giving birth in a hospital. Unfortunately, it's not common that women have negative experiences in the hospital during their births. But again, I think this is an issue to tackle within our medical system instead of having people switch to home births that could just put them at higher risk of complications. On top of this, something that I haven't really mentioned in this video is that I really wouldn't doubt if people were choosing holistic options over actual scientific medicine because they just simply don't have health insurance. because, you know, America. Most people choose to have planned home births delivered without problems, but research suggests that planned home births are associated with higher risk of infant death, seizures, and nervous system disorders than planned hospital births. On top of this, a decent amount of crunchy moms online will advocate for free births, which are basically births at home with no nurse practitioner present, which I just can't in my conscious mind recommend that anyone do. I'll link an article down below covering a woman's story about a terrible experience she had while delivering a free birth, which I do not share to scare you, only to shed a light on the dangers that come when people promote stuff like this. While the ideas espoused by free birthers may be radical, their ideology is rooted in legitimate concerns. A woman in America today is 50% more likely to die from pregnancy or childbirth than her mother was. And 1 in 6 women reported mistreatment, verbal abuse, threats, ignored police for help, violation of physical privacy, and physical abuse by healthcare providers during pregnancy and childbirth, according to a survey published last year in the Journal of Reproductive Health. Women who gave birth in hospitals were more than 5 times more likely to report mistreatment than those who gave birth at home. While Corinne herself does not explicitly promote one thing over another or have a particularly extreme view on being crunchy, she could be unintentionally sucking people into a well of negative beliefs that they cannot escape from. A really very popular crunchy creator was actually called out for this in 2022. Really Very Crunchy posts mostly satirical videos making fun of the extreme viewpoints that a lot of crunchy parents exhibit. Although her crunchy character is a satirized version of herself, she said in an interview that she'd still likely rank herself a 7 on the crunchy scale.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm more like a 7, and my character's probably past 10.
The character is the world's perception of a crunchy person, Jason, her husband, told BuzzFeed News. I'm pretty darn crunchy, Marl told BuzzFeed News. But the thing about my crunchiness is that I'm also pragmatic. I'm not going to make my kid eat a banana at a birthday party, but I am going to find a piece of cookie cake without red frosting. Now, one person on TikTok disagreed with Emily's self-identification, instead arguing that Emily is pushing people towards radicalization.
I've been tagged a lot in the I Am Leveling Up video that talks about how my videos are a pipeline to some extreme views. What bothers me the most about the video and what she says in the comments is that she doesn't allow for anyone to be partially crunchy or semi-crunchy or scrunchy, as I like to say. She clearly states that you can't have some crunchy views without being in an echo chamber, and if you disagree with what she's saying in the video, then your opinions are invalid because that means you're already traveling down the pipeline. That simply isn't true, and you can't have some stances that are considered crunchy and some that aren't. That doesn't make sense to me. Being crunchy is about reducing the toxins in your life, and it's a spectrum. For example, being against red food dye doesn't take you down a road to extremist views. Deciding to reduce the amount of screen time for your children won't put you in a league with the alt-right.
While I agree with Emily on the point that just because you have some crunchy views doesn't mean that you're automatically already on the pipeline, like the original creator argued, I do disagree with her second point. Being a part of certain communities or lifestyles can put you at a risk of becoming radicalized, even if you don't see it.
Yeah, there are toxic people in the crunchy community, but there's toxic people in every community. And crunchiness is a spectrum. It doesn't put you on this pipeline, but it does. Crunchiness is inherently pseudoscientific and appropriative. It misuses traditional knowledge from other cultures in many ways. And although traditional knowledge has been scientifically proven again and again to have benefits, a lot of the things that crunchiness runs from are things that have no scientific backing at all. And it's not like you have a choice to stop it when you're already snowballing down a hill. While
I don't think that Emily's videos in particular are in any way, shape, or form actually radicalizing people, or that she, a creator online, should be solely responsible for others' radicalization because it is the highly sophisticated algorithms to blame, as well as social media's refusal to stand against extremist points on their platforms, I do think that the lifestyle itself, as I've argued throughout this video, can take a form of radicalization in some people. It's important for creators who make this sort of content to denounce this sort of extremist thinking. Plus, guys, we know that conservatives don't actually know what satire is, right? For instance, I may post about hunting, but that does not mean that I align myself with people who have an arsenal of guns in their basement just in case. While I am, a doomsday prepper, I do like to prep more by actually having the knowledge of being able to take care of myself in the event of something happening, not just by hoarding 30 M16s in my basement like a freak. As an example, if you're a cisgender, heterosexual man who bodybuilds, you're not automatically an Andrew Tate bootlicker, but being someone who is part of a community both intrinsically and extrinsically that is frequently targeted by far-right extremists it does put you at a higher risk of falling down a rabbit hole. The creator who criticized Emily's account clarified in a Rolling Stone article on what pushed her to call crunchy creators like Emily out. The problem that I've been having, even with the term semi-crunchy lately, is that you're probably still getting exposed to these wild ideas, Laura says. You start looking for these accounts that have the tagline and you don't necessarily recognize any of the dog whistles, and then it goes from cloth diapering to toxins, and before you know it, you've ended up on flat earth theories. Laura says that she still has some vestiges of her crunchy lifestyle, making sure her kids eat lots of fruits and vegetables and avoiding sugar, and wasn't trying to insinuate that all natural solutions are harmful. But she stands firm that following crunchy accounts automatically exposes parents to harmful ideas. Laura adds that social media algorithms don't separate crunchy accounts by levels of extremes, meaning that even liking or following tame accounts can automatically suggest wilder ones on Instagram and TikTok. In Doppelganger, Klein says, the more people like Naomi Wolf and Steve Bannon focus on very real fears, the more liberals seem to shrug and sneer and treat the whole package of worries like crazy people stuff. Once an issue is touched by them, it seems to become oddly untouchable by almost everyone else. I think that throughout exploring this topic, we've seen this fully laid out in front of us. Are phones good for us? No. But does that mean that 5G towers give us cancer? Probably not. Is there a justified reason for a lot of groups to have vaccine hesitance? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that vaccines are giving kids neurological disorders. Throughout Klein's book, she paints a picture of how right and left can be a lot closer to one another than it may seem, especially within the wellness community. Most of us think of political culture in America as a spectrum. One side is the far left and way on the other is the far right. But occasionally the spectrum is more of a circle, with the two extremes joining up in a strange middle point around back. Whatever you identify with, crunchy, hippie, naturalist, granola, I don't fucking know. I hope that after watching this video, your eyes have been open to how much at risk you could be of falling into a dangerous pipeline. While I personally do implement a lot of these beliefs into my life, the most important thing to have in your life isn't dye-free food, it's critical thinking. By the way, just because I've mentioned it a lot throughout this video, my garden, okay? I've talked about it a lot throughout this video. I thought I could show you all what I've been growing, how my garden's been doing. I've actually been harvesting a shit ton of fucking cucumbers. I'd actually need to find something to do with them because I don't want them to go to waste. Might make some like Greek tzatziki sauce or something like that. I don't know. But I want to show you all it, just so you guys can get a vibe. I have integrity, okay? When I say I do stuff, I actually mean it, okay? So I want to go show you all my garden, okay? Come on, let's go. You gonna come? Yeah, let's go. All right. So here are my cucumber plants. I hope the wind isn't messing up the mic too much. These have been doing the best out of all of my plants. I've gotten like a dozen cucumbers by now. And howdy, neighbor. Oh, hey, how's it going? Yeah, I figured I'd come over and say hi. I see you've been working on this garden quite a lot and just wondering how I was doing. Yeah, I was just saying, I'm recording something. I was just saying that my garden has been doing really well. Yeah, that's great. You know, the real reason I came over, I'm gonna be honest with you. Local gardening club, we're meeting downtown in a couple minutes. I was wondering if you want to come. You know, since you seem to also be interested in this sort of lifestyle. You know what? I'd love to. You know, I feel like I'm pretty isolated, so what I'm trying to say, it'd be nice to meet some like-minded people around here. Sounds good. Well, I mean, we're going down there in a couple minutes. All I gotta do is just put this on, okay? Oh, what? What the fuck? Alright, that's it for me, and that's it for this video. I put a lot of time into this video. This script and researching for this video took me about 3 weeks. So, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you like me, please subscribe. I post once a week, you know, comedy, sort of commentary, video essay styles, so if that sounds like your thing, please make sure to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you know when I post a video. Do you implement crunchy beliefs into your lifestyle? Whatever you want to comment it down below. Got to give a special shout out to my Patreon members who are part of the Alpha tier and above. If you join my Alpha tier, you will get a verbal shout out by me at the end of all my videos. So thank you if you do that. If you want to become a Patreon member, there are multiple tiers. You can go check them out. That is the best way to directly support me. If you don't want to do it, it's cool. I still appreciate that you watch my videos. So thank you to Ben, Cap the Time Lord, and Olivia Schutt. Thank you all for being members of my Patreon. And thank you to all of my Patreon members. Well, I really hope you all enjoyed this video. And, you know, more importantly than that, I really hope I see you in the next video. I better see you in the next video. You'll be there, right? Okay, bye. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and